The alarm clock didn't just wake me up. It felt like a warning bell. 6 a.m. Time to put on the armor. My name is Maya. I'm 34 years old, living in Chicago, and I'm a senior marketing analyst. That sounds impressive on paper, but in reality, it often feels like I'm fighting a war where no one else admits there's a battlefield. I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. My natural hair was wrapped in a silk bonnet. Today was a big meeting day. I debated with myself, do I wear my hair out in its natural coils, or do I pull it back into a tight, professional bun to make my white colleagues feel more comfortable? It's a calculation I make every single morning. It's an exhausting mental tax that nobody else in my office has to pay. I chose the bun. I chose the path of least resistance because I didn't have the energy to deal with questions like, can I touch it? Or, it looks so wild today. By 8:30 a.m., I was walking into the glass-walled conference room. I was the only Black woman in the room. In fact, I was the only Black person in the room. This wasn't new, but the isolation never really goes away. "Good morning, Maya," David said, without looking up from his phone. "Morning, David," I replied, keeping my voice modulated. Not too loud, not too soft. Pleasant. Always pleasant. We were discussing the quarterly projections. I had spent 3 nights working on this data. I knew the numbers better than anyone. When there was a pause, I spoke up. I think we're overlooking the demographic shift in the southern region. If we don't pivot our strategy there, we're going to lose about 15% of our market share. David frowned slightly. "I don't know, Maya. That seems a bit pessimistic. Let's stick to the current trajectory for now." I nodded, swallowing the frustration that tasted like bile in my throat. 2 minutes later, Jason, a guy who had been hired 6 months after me, cleared his throat. "Actually," Jason said, pointing to the exact same chart I had just referenced, "I'm looking at the South and it looks risky. We might drop like 15% if we don't change things." David's eyes lit up. "Great catch, Jason. That's exactly the kind of forward thinking we need. Let's pivot." I sat there, frozen. It's a specific kind of pain, being invisible and hypervisible at the same time. They see my skin when they want to claim diversity, but they don't hear my voice when I speak. I looked at Jason, waiting for him to credit me. He didn't. He just smiled and took the praise. I didn't scream. I didn't roll my eyes, because if I did, I wouldn't just be an annoyed employee. I would be the angry Black woman. So I smiled, wrote down the notes, and let the silence scream for me. This was only Monday.
The meeting ended, and the air in the room felt heavy, at least to me. To everyone else, it was just another Tuesday. David and Jason were laughing about a golf game scheduled for the weekend as they packed up their laptops. I sat there for a moment longer than necessary, pretending to organize my papers. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a suppressed rage that I had nowhere to put. I had to swallow it, digest it, and let it sit in the pit of my stomach like a stone. I walked out of the conference room and headed straight for the break room. I needed coffee, but more than that, I needed a moment where I didn't have to perform. But in corporate America, the performance rarely ends. Sarah was there. Sarah is a junior associate, a white woman who considers herself an ally. She has a Black Lives Matter sticker on her water bottle and often asks me about my weekend with an intensity that feels like she's trying to prove she's not racist. "Hey, Maya," she said, looking up from her salad. Her expression shifted into a frown as she looked at me. "You look tense. Is everything okay?" I hesitated. This is the trap. If I say I'm fine, I isolate myself further. If I say I'm angry, I become the threat. "Just a long meeting," I said, reaching for the coffee pot. The quarterly projections took a lot out of me. Sarah nodded sympathetically. "Yeah, I heard Jason talking about the pivot to the southern region. He's so smart, isn't he? It's great that he caught that. My hand froze on the handle of the coffee pot. It felt like a physical slap. Sarah wasn't malicious, she was oblivious. And sometimes obliviousness hurts more than hate because it erases you completely. Actually, I said, keeping my voice soft, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I brought that up 5 minutes before he did. David just didn't hear me. Sarah's eyes widened. She looked uncomfortable, shifting in her seat. Oh, I'm sure he didn't mean to ignore you, Maya. David is a good guy. Maybe he was just distracted. You know how stressed he is about the merger. There it was, the excuse, the defense. Instead of acknowledging that I had been overlooked, she felt the need to defend the system. It's exhausting to be the person who has to explain the injury while you're the one bleeding. Maybe, I said, turning away so she wouldn't see my face fall. Maybe he was just distracted. I took my coffee back to my desk, but I couldn't focus. This wasn't just about credit for an idea. It was about the constant gaslighting. It's the feeling that maybe I am crazy. Did I speak loud enough? Was my tone wrong? Did I imagine the whole thing? I spent the next hour replaying the tape in my head, analyzing my own behavior, policing my own existence. This is the unseen labor of Black women. We do our jobs, and then we do the second job of managing everyone else's comfort around us. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Don't forget your doctor's appointment today. You've been complaining about that pain for months." I sighed. The pain. A dull, throbbing ache in my lower abdomen that had been my constant companion for the better part of a year. I had learned to work through it, just like I worked through the meetings, just like I worked through Sarah's comments. But today, the weight of it all felt unbearable. The doctor's office was cold. It smelled of antiseptic and old magazines. I had been sitting in the waiting room for 45 minutes past my appointment time. I watched the clock on the wall tick, each second stealing time away from the work I still needed to finish. When the nurse finally called my name, she mispronounced it. Maya? Maya, I corrected gently. She didn't apologize, just gestured for me to follow. Dr. Henderson was a middle-aged man who had been my primary care physician for 3 years. In those 3 years, I don't think he had ever spent more than 7 minutes in the room with me. "So, Maya," he said, not looking up from his tablet, "still having those cramps?" "It's not just cramps, Dr. Henderson," I said, sitting on the edge of the paper-covered table. "It's a sharp, stabbing pain. It wakes me up at night. I'm bleeding heavily. I'm tired all the time. I looked up the symptoms, and it sounds like it could be fibroids. My aunt had them, and..." He cut me off with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Let's not play internet doctor, okay? Look, I've reviewed your blood work from last time. You're under a lot of stress, right? High-pressure job?" "Yes, but..." "Stress manifests in the body in strange ways," he said, finally looking at me. His gaze wasn't empathetic, it was patronizing. "And your BMI is slightly elevated. If you lost about 15 pounds and managed your stress better, I guarantee these pains would subside." I gripped the edge of the table. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that I work out 4 times a week. I wanted to tell him that the pain feels like barbed wire in my stomach. I wanted to tell him about the statistics, how Black women are 3 times more likely to have fibroids than white women, how we are consistently under-medicated for pain because of the myth that we have thicker skin or higher pain tolerance. But I knew that if I raised my voice, if I demanded a referral, if I cried, I would be labeled difficult. A difficult patient doesn't get care. A difficult patient gets ignored. "I really don't think it's just stress," I tried one more time, my voice trembling. "Can we please do an ultrasound, just to rule it out?" He sighed, checking his watch. "Maya, an ultrasound is an expensive procedure.
Insurance might not cover it if I don't have a valid medical reason. Right now, the reason looks like lifestyle factors. Let's try a diet change for 3 months. If you're still in pain then, we'll talk. He stood up, signaling the end of the appointment. Take some ibuprofen. You'll be fine. I walked out of that office feeling smaller than I had ever felt. My body was screaming for help, and the person sworn to protect it had decided my pain was invalid. I sat in my car in the parking lot, the Chicago wind shaking the vehicle, and I finally let the tears come. I cried for the presentation Jason stole. I cried for Sarah's blindness. I cried for the doctor's arrogance. And mostly, I cried because I knew that tomorrow I would have to wipe my face, put on my armor, and do it all over again. I had to be strong. Everyone expects Black women to be strong. They admire our resilience so much that they forget we are human enough to break. But I was breaking. I could feel the cracks spreading, silent and deep.
The sanctuary and the storm. The drive home from the doctor's office was a blur of gray highway and red taillights. Chicago traffic is unforgiving, but it gave me time to compose myself. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were slightly puffy, but nothing a little concealer couldn't fix tomorrow. That was the rule. Never let them see the damage. By the time I pulled into the parking garage of my apartment complex, the tears had dried, leaving behind a tight, salty sensation on my cheeks. My apartment was my sanctuary. It was the one place in the world where I didn't have to be Maya, the senior analyst, or Maya, the diversity hire. I kicked off my heels the moment I crossed the threshold, letting them fall haphazardly near the door. The silence of the apartment should have been comforting, but tonight, it felt loud. It echoed with the doctor's dismissal. Lose 15 pounds, manage your stress. I walked into the kitchen and poured a glass of water, my hand resting instinctively on my lower stomach. The sharp stabbing pain had dulled into a heavy, rhythmic ache, like a bruised drum beating inside me. I opened the fridge, staring at the meal prep containers of grilled chicken and kale I had meticulously packed on Sunday. Diet change, he had said. As if kale could dissolve fibroids. As if spinach could cure systemic neglect. I closed the fridge door without taking anything out. I wasn't hungry. I was hollow. I moved to the living room and sank onto the sofa, pulling a knitted throw blanket over my legs. I needed to hear a voice that sounded like home. I dialed Naya. Naya has been my best friend since freshman year of college at Howard. She's a civil rights attorney in DC, and she pulls no punches. She picked up on the second ring. Tell me why I'm looking at a picture of you smiling at a brunch from 2 weeks ago, but I can feel your stress through the phone line, Naya said. No hello, she just knew. I went to the doctor today, I said, my voice cracking just a little. I hated how small I sounded. Let me guess, she sighed, the rustle of papers in the background stopping abruptly. He didn't listen, he told you to lose weight, he offered you Tylenol. Ibuprofen, actually, I corrected, a dry, humorless laugh escaping my lips. And he said I was just stressed. He wouldn't order the ultrasound. I hate them, Naya said, her voice dropping into that protective growl I loved. I hate how they treat us. Maya, you know you're not crazy, right? You know your body. I know, I whispered. But sometimes I wonder if maybe I am just being dramatic. Maybe everyone hurts like this, and they just handle it better than I do. Stop, Naya commanded gently. That is the gaslighting talking. That is the world telling you that your pain doesn't matter unless you are dying on the floor. Do not internalize their failure. You need a second opinion. I'm going to send you the name of a Black OBGYN in Chicago. My cousin goes to her. She doesn't take insurance, which sucks, but she listens.
"I'm just so tired, Naya," I confessed, closing my eyes. "I'm tired of fighting at work to be heard. I'm tired of fighting doctors to be treated. I feel like I'm carrying 100 pounds of bricks and everyone keeps asking me why I'm walking so slow." "I know, sis, I know. But you can put the bricks down for tonight. Take a hot bath, turn off your email. Do not check that presentation for tomorrow. Jason can figure it out since he's so smart." We laughed, a brief moment of lightness. Talking to Naya was like taking a deep breath after holding it underwater. She reminded me that I wasn't a machine. After we hung up, I tried to follow her advice. I ran a bath, adding Epsom salts and lavender oil. I submerged myself in the hot water, hoping to melt the tension in my shoulders. For 20 minutes, I wasn't an employee or a patient. I was just warm water and skin. But the peace was fragile. As I dried off and put on my pajamas, my phone lit up on the bathroom counter. A notification from work. Subject: urgent, Q3 data revision. Sender: David. Message: "Hey Maya, Jason noticed some discrepancies in the southern region numbers, the ones he pointed out. Can you rerun the analysis tonight so we have it for the 9 a.m. client call? Thanks." I stared at the screen. My blood ran cold, then hot. The ones he pointed out. The audacity was breathtaking. Jason had stolen my insight, and now David was asking me to do the grunt work to support the idea Jason stole, all while crediting Jason in the email? It was 9:45 p.m. I was in pain. I had just been told by a doctor that my stress was killing me. I had two choices. I could ignore the email, protect my peace, and risk being labeled unreliable or not a team player tomorrow, or I could open my laptop, swallow my pride, and do the work to ensure I kept my job, feeding the very machine that was eating me alive. I looked at my reflection in the mirror again. The armor was off. I looked soft, vulnerable, and exhausted. I walked out of the bathroom, went to the living room, and opened my laptop. I chose the work, because in this world, a Black woman's bills don't get paid by her boundaries. They get paid by her endurance. And tonight, I had to endure just a little bit more.
The morning after the late night email, I woke up feeling heavier than when I went to sleep. The sun was shining through the blinds, a cool, bright invitation to a day I didn't want to start. I had stayed up until 2 a.m. rerunning the numbers for David. I had sent the revised report with a polite note. Attached are the updated figures based on the Southern Region strategy I initially proposed. A subtle correction, a silent protest. When I stood up from the bed, the world tilted. A wave of dizziness washed over me, forcing me to grab the dresser for support. The pain in my abdomen wasn't a dull ache anymore. It was a screaming, twisting knot. It felt like something inside me was pulling apart. Just get through the meeting, I told myself. Just get through the 9 a.m. call and then you can take a half day. I skipped breakfast. The thought of food made me nauseous. I dressed in a haze, putting on a charcoal gray suit that felt like a straitjacket. By the time I got to the office, I was sweating, despite the air conditioning blasting at Arctic nubbles. The 9 a.m. client call was in the main boardroom. The client, a pharmaceutical giant, was joining via video link. David, Jason, and I sat on one side of the long mahogany table. "Good morning, everyone," David said, his voice booming with forced enthusiasm. "We have some exciting new directions to share with you today." As the meeting started, I focused on breathing. Inhale for 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. It was getting harder to concentrate. The voices around me sounded like they were underwater. Then the slide came up. My slide. The data I had crunched at 1 a.m. "As you can see here," Jason said, standing up and gesturing confidently at the screen, I did a deep dive into the Southern demographics last night, and the opportunity for growth is massive. I did. The words echoed in my head. I did. Not we, not Maya, I. I looked at David. He nodded in agreement, smiling at Jason. He didn't even glance at me. It wasn't just theft anymore. It was erasure. It was as if I didn't exist in the physical realm, only as a ghost who did the work so the living could take the glory. I wanted to speak up. I opened my mouth to say, "Actually, Jason," but the words didn't come. Instead, a sharp, blinding pain shot through my stomach, so intense that my vision blurred. It felt like a knife being twisted. I gasped, loudly. Every head in the room turned toward me. "Maya?" David asked, his brow furrowing, not with concern, but with annoyance at the interruption. "Are you all right?" I tried to stand up. I need to... I never finished the sentence. The floor seemed to rush up to meet me. The last thing I saw was the look of genuine shock on Jason's face, not because I was hurt, but because I had dared to make a scene. The darkness swallowed me whole, and for the first time in years, the noise stopped. I woke up to the rhythmic beeping of machines. The smell was familiar, antiseptic and cold. I wasn't in the conference room. I was in a hospital bed. My mother was sitting in the chair next to me, her hands clasped in prayer, her face etched with worry. When she saw my eyes open, she let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. "Baby," she whispered, reaching for my hand. "Oh, thank God. Maya, look at me." "Mom." My voice was raspy. "What happened?" "The meeting." "Forget the damn meeting," my mother snapped, though her eyes were wet. "You collapsed, Maya. You passed out right there in front of those people. The ambulance brought you here." A doctor walked in, not Dr. Henderson, but a black woman with dreadlocks pulled back in a ponytail and kind, serious eyes. She looked at my chart and then at me. "Miss Brooks, I'm Dr. Lewis. We've stabilized you, but we need to talk about what's going on inside your body." I tried to sit up, but the pain pinned me down. Is it stress?" My other doctor said. Dr. Lewis shook her head firmly. "It is not just stress. We did an emergency ultrasound and an MRI when you came in. Maya, you have multiple large uterine fibroids. One of them had degenerated and caused significant internal bleeding. That's why you collapsed. Your hemoglobin levels are dangerously low." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You have been operating on half a tank of gas for a long time. If you had waited another week, this could have been fatal. We need to schedule surgery, soon." I lay back against the pillow, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. It wasn't fear I felt. It was validation. I wasn't crazy. The pain was real. The danger was real. "But work," I mumbled, the old programming still trying to run. "I have a project." My mother squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "They will replace you in a week if you die. Do you understand me? You are killing yourself for people who wouldn't even attend your funeral." Her words hit me harder than the floor had. "They will replace you in a week." I looked at the ceiling. The armor was gone. The suit was gone. I was just a body that had been pushed too far. And lying there, hooked up to IVs, I finally realized that the price of being a strong, black woman was way too high. I couldn't afford it anymore.
The hospital room was quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioning. It had been 24 hours since I collapsed, 24 hours since I stopped running. My mother had gone to the cafeteria to get coffee, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I stared at the side table. There was a vase filled with an enormous, expensive arrangement of white lilies. They had arrived 2 hours ago. The card attached was typed, not handwritten. Get well soon. We need you back. The team. It was the "we need you back" that stuck in my throat like a fishbone. Not "we hope you're okay," not "take your time," but "we need you back." Even in their well wishes, there was a demand. It was a reminder of my utility, not my humanity. My phone, which I had promised my mother I wouldn't touch, buzzed on the tray table. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have, but the habit was ingrained in my bones. It was a text from David. "Hey Maya, heard you're in the hospital. So sorry to hear that. Flowers should be there soon. Quick question. Did you upload the raw data files to the shared drive before the meeting? Jason can't find them, and we need to finalize the client deck. Let me know ASAP." I read the message 3 times. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't ask if I was in pain. He didn't ask if I was going to be okay. He asked for the data that Jason had claimed credit for, but didn't know how to locate because he hadn't done the work. My mother walked back in, holding 2 styrofoam cups. She saw me staring at the phone, saw the tears welling up in my eyes. Not tears of sadness this time, but of cold, hard clarity. "What is it?" she asked, setting the coffee down and reaching for the phone. "Is it him?" I nodded, unable to speak. She took the phone from my hand and read the message. Her jaw tightened, and I saw a flash of that fierce protective anger that had raised me. "Do not reply," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "But if I don't tell him where the files are, the project will fail," she interrupted, "and that is not your problem. You are bleeding internally, Maya. You are scheduling surgery to remove tumors from your body, and this man is asking for a password." Just then, there was a knock on the door. It was Nia. She wasn't wearing her lawyer suit. She was in sweatpants and a Howard University hoodie, carrying a silk bonnet and a container of homemade soup. "I saw the flowers outside. They smell like a funeral. I told the nurse to move them to the hallway." She looked at me, then at my mom, then at the phone in my mom's hand. "David?" Nia guessed. "David," I confirmed. Nia walked over to the bed. She took my hand, her grip warm and solid. "Maya, listen to me. You are about to go on medical leave, short-term disability. Dr. Lewis already signed the paperwork. Legally, you do not have to answer that text. Actually, legally, you shouldn't answer that text." "It feels like I'm failing," I whispered, the confession tumbling out. "I worked so hard to get into that room. If I stop now, they win. They'll say I couldn't handle it. They'll say I wasn't cut out for it." "Let them talk," Nia said firmly. "Let them say whatever they want. You are not a soldier, Maya. You are a woman who deserves to live. If winning means dying on their conference room floor, then let them lose." I looked at the phone one last time. I thought about the late nights. I thought about the fake smiles. I thought about the doctor telling me I needed to lose weight while a tumor grew inside me. I thought about Jason's smug face. I took a deep breath. It hurt physically, but it also felt like the first real breath I had taken in years. "Mom," I said, "turn it off." "Turn what off, baby?" "The phone. Turn it all the way off." My mother smiled, a real proud smile. She held the power button down. We watched the screen go black. The connection was severed. "I'm having the surgery, and I'm taking the full 8 weeks off. No emails, no checking in." "That's my girl," my mother said, kissing my forehead. For the first time in my career, I chose myself. The silence that followed wasn't empty, It was full of possibility. The world didn't end because I turned my phone off. The sun was still setting outside the window, painting the Chicago skyline in hues of purple and gold. I closed my eyes. The project might fail. Jason might panic. David might be angry. But I was going to sleep. And for the first time, that was enough.
3 weeks post-surgery. The calendar on my wall still showed the month of the meeting, but time felt different now. It wasn't measured in deadlines or quarterly goals. It was measured in naps, in cups of ginger tea, and in the slow, steady knitting together of my own flesh. I sat on my balcony, wrapped in a thick cardigan, watching the Chicago autumn turn the leaves into fire and gold. My phone was back on, but the work email app was deleted. I had set a strict boundary. Only friends, only family. For the first week, the silence terrified me. My brain, addicted to the adrenaline of stress, kept searching for a crisis. What did I forget? Who is mad at me? What needs to be fixed? I would wake up with a jolt, heart racing, only to realize there was nowhere I needed to be. But by the third week, the panic began to subside. It was replaced by something softer, something I hadn't felt since I was a child. Stillness. I ran my hand over my stomach. The sharp, stabbing pain was gone. In its place was a soreness from the incision, a reminder of what had been removed. Dr. Lewis had removed 4 large fibroids. "You've been carrying the weight of a bowling ball," she had told me after the surgery. A bowling ball. I thought about that. I had been walking around, smiling, leading meetings, and navigating microaggressions, all the while carrying a bowling ball in my womb. And they had called me difficult for asking for help. I reached up and touched my hair. For the first time in years, I hadn't straightened it or pulled it back. It was out, a halo of tight, springy coils framing my face. I caught my reflection in the glass door. I looked different, not just because of the hair, but because the tension around my eyes had loosened. The permanent frown line between my brows was smoothing out. I picked up a sketchbook I hadn't touched in 5 years. I used to love drawing. I used to love colors. But corporate America drains the color out of you until everything is gray, navy, and beige. I started to sketch the tree across the street. My hand was a little shaky, but the charcoal felt good against the paper. My phone chimed. It was an email notification, personal account. It was from LinkedIn. Jason Meller posted an update, excited to announce the successful launch of our Q3 strategy. Big thanks to the team for the hard work. I stared at the preview. He was taking the victory lap. A month ago, this would have sent me into a spiral of rage. I would have drafted a passive-aggressive email. I would have vented to Naya for hours. But today, sitting on my balcony with my healing body and my wild hair, I swiped the notification away. "Keep it," I whispered to the empty air. "You can have it." It was a revelation. I didn't want his praise. I didn't want David's validation. I didn't want a seat at a table where I had to cut off parts of myself just to fit in the chair. I realized then that the surgery hadn't just removed the fibroids, it had severed the cord that tied my self-worth to my job title. I wasn't Maya the senior analyst, I was Maya. Just Maya. And for the first time, I was starting to like her. Later that afternoon, I put on an old soul record, Aretha Franklin. I danced slowly in my living room, careful of my stitches, swaying to the music. I was reclaiming the space. I was reclaiming my body. The knot in my stomach was gone, and the knot in my spirit, the one that told me I had to be perfect to be worthy, was finally starting to unravel. 8 weeks. That's how long I had been away. In corporate time, that's an eternity. projects launch, quarters end, stocks fluctuate. But in human time, it was just enough to remember who I was. On my first day back, I stood in front of the mirror again, but this time the routine was different. I didn't reach for the straightener. I didn't pull my hair into the tight, headache-inducing bun that made me look safe. I fluffed out my afro, letting it take up space. I put on a bright mustard yellow blazer, a color I usually avoided because it was too loud. Today, I wanted to be loud. Walking into the office building felt like walking onto a movie set where I had forgotten my lines. The security guard, Mr. Earl, gave me a warm smile. "Good to see you up and walking, Ms. Maya," he said. He was the only person in the building who looked genuinely happy to see me. When I stepped off the elevator on the 14th floor, the air was the same, stale, cold, and buzzing with the hum of computers. "Maya, welcome back." It was Sarah. She rushed over, holding a coffee cup. "Oh my God, we missed you so much. It's been crazy here. How are you? You look different, in a good way." "I feel better, thank you." My voice was calm. I didn't offer details. I didn't say, "It was hard," or "I was scared." I gave her nothing but politeness. I walked to my desk. Someone, probably an intern, had piled 8 weeks' worth of mail on my keyboard. My inbox had 1,400 unread emails. Before I could even sit down, David appeared. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask about the surgery. He said, "Maya, good timing. Glad you're back. We're in crisis mode with the monolithic account. Since you were out for the Q3 launch, I need you to play catch up fast. I scheduled a briefing for us in 10 minutes. The old Maya would have dropped her bag, opened her laptop immediately, and started apologizing for being away. The old Maya would have felt guilty for abandoning the team. The new Maya remained standing.
In pretty different ways.
The inevitable happened. The client meeting for the project I had almost killed myself over, the one I collapsed for, was finally happening. This time, I wasn't anxious. I walked into the boardroom wearing my mustard blazer, my notebook in hand. David sat at the head of the table, sweating slightly. Jason was to his right, clicking his pen nervously. They were nervous because the client, Elena Sterling, had a reputation for eating unprepared executives for lunch. She was the VP of operations for a Fortune 500 company, and she didn't suffer fools. The presentation started. David did the intro, using buzzwords that meant nothing. Then he handed it over to Jason to explain the data strategy. My data strategy. Jason stood up. He looked good, I'll give him that. He spoke confidently for the first 2 minutes. But then Elena raised her hand. "Stop," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the room instantly. She looked at the screen, then at Jason. "You're talking about a demographic shift in the South, but on slide 14, the projection for Q4 contradicts the historical data from Q1. Can you explain the variable you used to account for that discrepancy?" Jason froze. He blinked. Well, the variable, it's mostly just standard market fluctuation." Elena stared at him. "Standard market fluctuation doesn't account for a 15% variance, Jason. Did you run the regression analysis yourself?" Jason looked at David. David looked at his papers. The silence stretched, long and excruciating. They were drowning. And for the first time, I didn't reach for a life raft to throw them. I sat back in my chair and took a sip of water. Elena turned her gaze away from them. She scanned the room until her eyes landed on me. She looked at me with a curiosity that felt like recognition. "Maya, isn't it?" Elena asked. "Yes, Miss Sterling," I replied clearly. "You've been quiet, but I noticed your name in the metadata of the original file sent over 3 months ago.
before the revisions. She leaned forward. Can you explain the variable? I didn't look at David for permission. I didn't look at Jason. Yes, the discrepancy isn't an error. It accounts for the new supply chain legislation passed in Georgia last July. The model adjusts for a temporary dip in Q4 before a rebound in Q1. If we ignore that legislation, the projection is overly optimistic. My model is conservative, but accurate. Elena smiled. It was a small, sharp smile. Accurate. I like accurate. Thank you, Maya. She turned back to David. David, from now on, I want all communications regarding strategy to go through Maya. If she's not on the email, don't send it. David turned a shade of pale, usually reserved for ghosts. Of course, Elena. Maya is a key part of the team. Clearly, Elena said dryly. She seems to be the only one who knows what's going on. The rest of the meeting was a blur of David trying to recover and failing. I answered every question Elena threw at me. I wasn't showing off. I was just doing my job. The job I was excellent at. When the meeting ended, everyone shuffled out. David tried to congratulate me, his smile tight and fake. Good catch, Maya. Team effort. I ignored him and began packing up. Maya, a voice called out. I turned. It was Elena Sterling. She was still sitting at the table, her iPad open. Do you have a moment? I said, certainly. She looked me up and down, taking in the mustard blazer, the natural hair, the calmness in my posture. You're too big for this room, she said bluntly. I was taken aback. Excuse me? This company, she gestured around the glass walls. They're using you as a crutch. I watched you let that boy hang himself out to dry today. It was ruthless. I loved it. I allowed myself a small smile. I just answered the question. Listen, Elena said, closing her iPad case with a snap. My company is looking for a director of strategic insights. It's not an analyst role, it's leadership. You'd have a team, you'd have a budget, and you'd have a salary that reflects the fact that you clearly do the work of 3 men. My heart skipped a beat. A director-level role? That was 2 steps above where I was now. I'm flattered, Elena. Don't be flattered, be interested, she said, sliding a business card across the mahogany table. Call me tomorrow. We can skip the HR screening. I've seen enough. I picked up the card. It felt heavy, like gold. I'll call you, I said. Good. Now go home, Elena said, checking her watch. It's 5:05 p.m. You're off the clock. I walked out of that conference room, the card burning a hole in my pocket. I looked at David's office. He was yelling at Jason through the glass. They looked small. They looked irrelevant. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and knew that I had just attended my last meeting in this building. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was ascending. The resignation letter was short. 2 sentences. I didn't waste ink on gratitude I didn't feel. I walked into David's office the next morning at 10 a.m. He looked up, expecting the catch-up meeting he had demanded. Instead, I placed the white envelope on his desk. What is this? He asked, his smile faltering. My 2 weeks' notice, I said. I've accepted a position as Director of Strategic Insights at Sterling Operations. David stood up so fast his chair rolled back and hit the wall. Sterling? Elena Sterling? Maya, you can't be serious. We're in the middle of the quarter. You know the non-compete clause. I had a lawyer review my contract, I interrupted calmly. Naya had been very thorough. Sterling is a client, not a competitor. The non-compete doesn't apply. And as for the quarter, that sounds like a management problem, David, not an analyst problem. He sputtered. He tried to bargain. Look, if it's about the salary, we can match it. We can give you a senior title. We can... It's not about the money, I said.
and for the first time, I looked at him with genuine pity. He didn't understand. He thought he could buy my silence, but I had already found my voice. It's about respect. It's about my health. And frankly, David, it's about the fact that I have outgrown this place. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. That was the loudest sound I could have made. The next 2 weeks were a blur of handovers. I organized my files perfectly, not for David, but for whoever would come after me. I left a small note hidden in the desk drawer for the next Black woman who might sit there. It read, "You are worthy. You are enough. Don't let them eat you alive." On my last day, I packed my single box of belongings. The photo of my mom, my favorite mug, the small succulent plant that had somehow survived the lack of light in that office. Jason avoided eye contact with me all day, but as I walked to the elevator, Sarah stopped me. She looked sad. "I really am going to miss you, Maya. I'm sorry if I didn't always get it." I looked at her. "Thank you, Sarah. Just listen to the next person. Really listen." I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, sealing off the gray carpet, the fluorescent lights, and the heavy air of the 14th floor. As the numbers counted down, 14, 10, 5, 1, I felt lighter with every floor. When the doors opened to the lobby, Naya was standing there. She was wearing a bright red dress and holding 2 cups of champagne, in travel mugs, of course. "Did you do it?" she asked, grinning. I did it. I exhaled a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 7 years. "To Maya," Naya said, handing me a cup. "The director." "To Maya," I corrected, clinking my cup against hers. "The woman who chose herself." Epilogue. 6 months later. My new office has a window that overlooks the lake. There is natural light everywhere. I work hard, but I don't work while I'm bleeding. I have a team of 4 people, and I make sure they go home at 5 p.m. I make sure they know their work is valued. My fibroids are gone. The scars have faded to thin silver lines on my stomach, battle wounds that remind me of what I survived. I go to therapy every Thursday. I take pottery classes on Tuesdays. I wear my hair in a giant, glorious puff every single day, and nobody asked to touch it. I still have bad days. The trauma of being invisible doesn't vanish overnight. Sometimes, in a meeting, I feel that old panic rise up, the fear that I will be interrupted or ignored. But then I look at the nameplate on my desk. Maya Brooks, Director. And more importantly, I look at myself in the mirror. I see a woman who is whole. I see a woman who stopped setting herself on fire to keep others warm. I picked up my pen and started writing the strategy for the new year. The sun poured in through the window, warm and golden, touching my skin. I am here. I am seen. And finally, I am free.